Welcome to the Ambitious Introvert podcast, created especially for introverts, empaths, and highly sensitive entrepreneurs to help you build, grow, and scale a successful, sustainable business. I'm your host, Emma-Louise Parks, business and mindset coach for ambitious introverts. After 17 years working as an air traffic controller, the ultimate fast-paced, high-stimulus, extrovert-friendly role, my mission now is to show introverts that they too can create big results and success because of who they are, not in spite of it. I focus on introvert-friendly business and marketing strategy to help you switch overwhelm for clarity, confidence, and clients. Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of The Ambitious Introvert, where we are going behind the business. I love bringing you these episodes because I think there's so much in business that we don't see on the surface. It doesn't get shown on social media, or we see the result of, but we never really know the process, the context, the nuance, any of that. So I am thrilled that today's guest is someone who is uber transparent. And not only that, but we're bringing you behind the business. It's a little bit different because rather than how I made a load of money, this one is going to be how I stopped making a lot of money by choice. So Megan, thank you for joining us. Please introduce yourself and tell my audience a little bit about you and your business.
Yes. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited. I love the behind the scenes. I think it's such a genius series to do. So I'm honored to be part of it. My name is Megan. I've been in business in some way, shape, or form since 2012 when I started in network marketing. In about 2016, 2017, branched out into my own coaching business, health and wellness. And then about 6-7 months in, realized I'm really a business coach and life coach. And so I dove deep into that in 2017, 2018, and have been doing some sort of business coaching ever since, but it has definitely evolved, which I know we'll talk about. I wouldn't say I do the same exact coaching as I did back then. It's definitely grown. And now I really hone in on helping people create what I call their unique method to build their brand and sell out their offers and really build a business model that supports the life they want to have outside of their business, because I didn't do that, which we will talk about. And so now that I have done that, I'm like, this is what I'm passionate about now. It's just really prioritizing your marriage and your personal life and building your business around that, not making that fit into your business. So that's been my mission ever since. And it's been a journey and definitely lots of ups and downs, but it's been a great ride. The true entrepreneur roller coaster for sure. So.
Always the roller coaster. I love it.
Yeah.
So I'm definitely going to be asking you lots of juicy questions about that. But before we dive in, do you want to tell us a little bit more about how you work with clients and the kind of methodology that you use to ensure that they are building that business that's right for them?
Yeah, no, I love that question. So I think one of the biggest things that I do with clients, and this is what I coined my unique coaching method a few years ago. I had really been doing it for years. It's just one of those things that you don't actually put a name to. You're like, what is it that I do? And so just finally put a name to it a couple of years ago. But what I found was a lot of the clients I'd worked with that really took off, as cliche as this is, being themselves, it's really what it is. There was a method to it. There was some kind of science, if you will. And what we did, we kind of looked at 3 different aspects of their life. We looked at just their personality. How would their friends describe them? How would their family describe them? People who are behind the scenes, not watching them on the app necessarily, but when they're their most raw and real without a filter on. So that part, what are they really great at? What's their expertise? But then what's their approach to that expertise that's slightly different than another person who has a similar expertise? Because even within business, for example, you can say there's 2 people who are really great at live launching, right? But they both probably approach it slightly differently. And so what I found was that trio, their personality, their expertise, their unique approach, it's probably way more than that, but 3 is enough. That trifecta kind of really resulted in a very unique brand for all my clients. And I accidentally kind of did this with them. And to the point where I was like, oh, this is really repeatable because it's so unique to them, but it's a specific framework that we followed. And so I really would dive into those 3 aspects, and that would create a brand that felt really good to them because it's them, but in a way that's not like, just be yourself, because that's hard to do. So it actually gave like a process to being yourself. And within that, a big thing was I'd say, great, what's your energy like? Are you like, I love that you talk about a lot about introvertedness and things like that. Are you an introvert? Are you an extrovert? What's your Enneagram? What's your human design? Let's take that into consideration. And then most importantly, what are your actual responsibilities outside of your life? Are you married? Do you have children? Do you have elderly parents? Like, do you have a digital nomad lifestyle you want to live? And let's make sure we craft your offers around that. And also make sure you're attracting clients who will honor that, because that's a whole other discussion we could have. So that's kind of like the process that I go through.
I've just read a book called The Gap and the Gain by Dan Sullivan, which is really great, but is stuff that I've actually been doing for years as a certified coach, but didn't realize it. But he's saying that most people in general, and definitely most entrepreneurs, because we're ambitious, we look to where we want to be. We look at the ideal and we measure ourselves against that. So we never meet in it. There's always more to do. We never feel like we've accomplished things. So he says you've got to look back at your achievements and then you'll measure how far you've come. That gives you a boost. It gives you confidence and that gives you the motivation to continue. In a nutshell, if you don't want to read the book, that's it. But, but what you said there, and something that I do with clients and something I did with my own brand, this is what I love, is going back and looking and saying like, okay, rather than just looking forward and trying to create something, go back. Like the reason my brand came about was because I was able to look at my 3 favorite clients that I'd worked with. And what was it about them? What did I love? And the thing that came up is they were all action takers. They were very self-motivated and would do the work, didn't need a ton of accountability. And that's how ambitious came around in the ambitious introvert. So I think, that looking back is so, so important as well, like you say, and just looking back at yourself, like, okay, how do I work best? What do I want to do?
Totally.
What actually works for me in this situation?
Yeah, I love that you brought that up. And it's funny you said 3, because that's usually what I encourage people to do is like pick 3. That's why I love it. People that you loved working with. What's similar? I'm sure there's overlaps, there's similarities. And I'm sure you just hit on it. It's not so much what are the results that they're craving. It's how did they show up? What's their personality like? Or like, are they introverted? What's their Enneagram? Things like that. It just makes your working relationship with your clients so much more enjoyable. And when that's in place, they tend to get better results. Then they tend to refer people, and then they tend to have beautiful testimonials. It's such a domino effect. And people, I think, don't focus on the personality of the client you're attracting, which is so important.
So important. I love that. Yeah. I love that. So let's dive into your upheaval in your business. So as you have alluded, you've been in business a long time in various guises, and you had a very, very successful business. And, definitely one of the vanity metrics that people are focused on in this industry is like 100K, whether that's 100K year, 100K launch, 100K month. So you were at that stage of 100K months. So you had hit the dream. You'd done what everyone was trying to do, that ideal that they put in the gap and the gains, but it didn't go so well.
Yeah. I love this. And it's so funny. I just recorded a podcast right before this, and I talked about how I feel like a couple years ago, so much of my motivation, it wasn't conscious. I don't think it wasn't, because when I think back to it, it really wasn't. But so much of my motivation once I hit those bigger numbers was to impress other people, to be quite blunt. Once you hit that, it's like this, you feel this desire or this pressure to keep it up, to look for looks, right? And it was hard for me to admit that on that podcast, but I was like, since I just did that, I'll do it again on this one. I was like, but you know how many people actually are feeling that way? Like it's this pressure. And then I realized I just hit this moment. Well, my marriage was like very declining really quickly for many other reasons way before my business, but it just kind of like elevates it, right? Your business definitely shines a light on everything else in your life, which is what I learned quickly. And I just realized like, this isn't why I'm doing this. I'm not doing this to impress people on Instagram. I'm not doing this for a popularity contest. I'm not in high school. What is happening? And I had to have a real big check-in and go, I'm doing this for my family, my legacy, my happiness, my security, and the clients I'm working with, obviously. And so it kind of had to flip the script of like, I'm not doing this to impress other people or to say I hit numbers. I'm doing this for all those other reasons. So when I kind of had that like moment of, okay, so much has to change in my life, I decided I'm going to just cut certain things. And that cut a lot of income very quickly. And it's so interesting because I've had some clients want to do this, who I've worked with, who are at these high numbers. And they're like, okay, I want you to help me with this. So how did you replace it? What did you have in place to replace it? And I'm like, I didn't. That's my answer.
Nothing.
I was like, I'm not going to pretend I did. Right. And, I think it's great if you want to like wait till you get to that point to replace it. If you're in that position mentally, emotionally, I wasn't. I was like, something's got to go, because to get to those 100K months, all of my product suite depended on me, except for one offer. One offer was a passive course, which looking back, I'm like, man, I should have gone way more into that because it was great. It was such a good offer too. And so that's what was exhausting about it. I hit those great numbers, but I was coaching all the time. I was on calls. Talk about an introvert's nightmare. And surprisingly too, I'm very much on the cusp. I'm not, people think I'm extroverted because I'm very outgoing, I guess you would say. I'm not. And so I was exhausted. I was like 9 to 5, really like more like 9 to 6, Monday through Friday, like always on calls. Then you don't count the creation. I was working on the weekends, creating my launch content, all of that, the Voxer, everything. And before you knew it, I was just like, wow, I'm making this great money, but I'm literally working 24/7, even with a team, even with help. And I just felt like I could never take a break because it did rely so much on me. And so I just urge everyone, when you see these big numbers, when you hear this stuff, more times often than not, a lot of the times when they get there, it's from them trading time for money. And there's nothing wrong with that if they can sustain it, but most people I know can't. And I definitely couldn't. I got to that point where I was like, I'm just not happy. My marriage is falling apart. I'm exhausted. And I created, without consciously doing it, a sort of a codependency with my clients, where if they didn't do well, I didn't feel good. And so even when I wasn't coaching, if a client had a rough week or not a great launch or whatever, so much stuff happens, I would take such responsibility. I'm like, wait, this is ridiculous. I can't take responsibility for everyone's results. That's not good coaching either. So I had to do a whole kind of evaluation. Really, when my husband and I got back together, we separated for 6 months, from January 2020, not knowing we were going into a pandemic, so that was fun, to June 2020. Once we got back together, I was like, all right, something's got to change. And by the end of the year, I decided, and I got rid of one whole mastermind. I dropped 1 to 8 people versus 10, and I got rid of a lot of private clients, and right away cut about, $30,000, $40,000 in monthly recurring revenue. So I can dive more into it, but that was like that kind of the overview, and it's changed a lot even since then. So
one thing I would love to touch on before we dive into that, because I think the revenue part is a fascinating piece of it, because I talk about sustainable, profitable business, which, we're talking about that not being sustainable, but we've never had this discussion. But do you think you are highly sensitive or empathic?
I think I don't know if I'd say highly sensitive, because I've had close friends and clients who identify as that, but I'm not far away from it. Definitely empathic, but I wouldn't say highly sensitive, but yes. So sort of.
When you said
that the right answer
about, like almost taking on a client, if a client has a bad launch and you take it on. And I think I see so much of that. And I used to be very, very much like it. Yes. And I see it a lot in my clients, because what if I can't get my clients results? I'm like, you don't get them results. You support them while they get their own results. But
exactly.
I just think it's an interesting thing, because when we do, when we are people that care and we absorb the emotions of other people, it can really throw you 100%. When a client comes to a call and they're upset. Oof. And and if you're then doing like 1 million hours of coaching a week on top of that.
I learned, I don't regret 1 second of it, because I learned so much about myself, and I became a much better coach for exactly the reason you said. I was like, I could have one client and I don't want to feel that way. It doesn't matter. And so that's something that I worked a lot on over the last, 2.5 years, to get to this point where I don't take responsibility for when they do great and when they have those quote unquote failures. That's another thing too, is like if a client has an amazing launch and does better than they thought, it's not because of me. It's because of them. Like you said, I guided them, and I do believe you play a part, but I think it's both ways, because I see a lot of people like take credit for a lot of that stuff too. And it's like, no, they did it. I didn't make them. They made themselves. Or I've had coaches that I feel like have done that a little bit. And I'm like, excuse me, I did the work. Thank you very much. So yeah, I love that. That's a great point.
So when we're talking about profitability, I know people will be listening to this and going, oh, you had to drop down to like $40,000 a month. Like, oh, what did you do? Did you have to fire the man that like polishes your diamonds or whatever? Because I think it's so easy to be like, that's still so much money, to where a lot of people are. But also when we talk about the online space of transparency, a lot of people are making these big figures, like 100K a month, but their operating costs can be what I have seen examples of people whose operating costs are actually more than their revenue on certain months. So the point I'm trying to make to anyone listening, thinking, that they're not having that much sympathy here, is if you weren't 60% profitable, you couldn't have done that, because you would have been going into debt or not be able to pay team or run ads or whatever the thing is by cutting out that revenue, right?
Oh, 100%. Exactly. Like I was able to cut back on that because I was bringing in a good amount of profit. And so I was like, okay, right? Like we're going to take this. Now, the thing that I did that I learned that year was I didn't lower my expenses enough after that. So I had a lot of profit. I had a lot of savings too. I basically knew like I could stop coaching for a while and be fine. And I was in a very lucky place. Like we built it up to that point where I was like, I feel very lucky, very privileged to be here. But you're exactly right. It's because I had a lot of profitability. But then once I dropped it down, I didn't actually really drop my expenses. So even though I had a lot of profit, now that my income went down, my profit went down too. And that's something that I've learned so much. And now guiding other people to restructure their business model, you learn the most, just a side note, by making these mistakes too. And that's something I'm always so grateful. I'm like, I wouldn't have learned that if I did it perfectly, So I learned, oh, wow, if you're going to drop your income that much, something else probably should go. And I was just like, no, I still need all the help because I didn't want to burn myself out by putting myself back in, which, I don't really regret. I think it's fine. But then I quickly learned, okay, we don't have a plan to replace this anytime soon. We've got to change something. And so I made some investments that I've done an episode about this that weren't great, that were kind of one of those, like, I guess, Hail Mary, like maybe this is the thing that's going to help take the funnel off. Funnel investments are very scary. I've made some great ones. I've made some horrible ones. And that was a huge one that really set me back, just more emotionally, not only monetarily, and I got nothing for it, but I felt like after I got rid of all that income, I tried stuff and I tried like to invest in certain things that I trusted would work. And some did, some didn't. And so I learned that and I was like, wow, okay, we've really got to change that. And so that's been this whole last year has really been evaluating our expenses and going, what is really needed here? And what have I just kind of been trained to think I need? And I think you bring up such a great point. Once I got to a certain income, I feel like it was around the 50K-ish mark. And it so depends on how you're making that money. So I just want to make that really clear. You could have the most simple business model and not really need any help at 50K, or you could have a very complicated one and need a lot of help. And I complicated it more than I needed to because I saw it kind of modeled that way to me. I thought, okay, to scale, I need a huge team. I need all these fancy things. And before I knew it, I was like, oh my gosh, it's a lot to hold on, even with an OBM, even with help. I just felt like this got too big in a way that I didn't really want. That's the thing. I kind of got talked, I don't want to say got talked into it because I make my own decisions, but a little bit, where I was like, I liked my comfortable, really good income business. Like I felt so fulfilled by that. And it's not that you can't get to these big numbers without that. You totally can. And that's where we're at right now is we're building back up to get back there, but in a very different way. But I just looked at it and I was like, I don't want to manage all these people. I don't want all these things. Like I want a simpler model. And that's something I don't think people who make that much really like to admit is it gets a little too complicated and hired too many people at one point and had to really evaluate. And like you said, I've been lucky in the point where just during that time, this was in 2021, this is last year where I was experimenting. There was like 1 or 2 months where I basically broke even. And that was a very much like, okay, what are you doing? You've never experienced this before. You've been lucky to, always make sure you're at least 50%, if not more profitable. And I said, hey, I tried things. I tried it. It didn't work. And from there, had to go, okay, what's really essential here and what's not? Because like you said, anyone can say they make, not anyone, but if you make that much money, you can bring in all that revenue and you could be bringing home 10% of that, 5% of that. And is that winning? Is that you reaching all these big goals if you're stressed because your cash flow is so low? I've been in both extremes before, so I can definitely speak to that. So sorry, I just kind of rambled, but I hope that shed some light.
It wasn't a ramble, that was a flow.
Okay, great. I love it.
Flow of your
Thank
wisdom,
you,
Megan. We'll take it as that. But I think the online space is such a goldfish bowl as well, that you can be like, oh, well, I have to have a VA and I have to have a social media manager.
Yeah.
And I have to have an OBM. And then I have to have this and I have to have a coach and I have to be in a mastermind. And, you can look at all, and then I have to run ads, like you said, I have to have a funnel. And very quickly, that's lots of money each month. But equally, I know people that are at that kind of 50 to 100K a month mark that have got 1 or 2 team members.
Yeah,
because their business model allows it. And that kind of blew my mind when I spoke to them, because I was like, oh, do you not need all of these things? And they were like, nope, not the way I do it. Yep. So there are options. It doesn't have to be 30 team members and, all of this stuff. It can be, but it doesn't have to be.
But it doesn't have to be. Exactly. And that's really what we've been doing the last year, is just like simplifying, honestly, not only the team, but also the structure of the offers. Like, why are we overcomplicating this? And, also understanding, depending on who you're attracting, I used to think a mastermind, for a great example, needed monthly private calls, because that's what I was modeled. And when I actually stepped back and thought about it, I was like, wait, but that's not a mastermind. That's one-on-one coaching. So what is the difference here? And so that was a huge remodel for me and gave me way more space back, attracted people that honestly were just really, really great to work with because they're super independent, and gave me time back and space back. And that doesn't take a lot to manage. It's pretty simple. I could do it myself. I have an OBM, but I could easily do that myself. So I love this conversation, because I think it's that phrase, you get too big for your britches. I think that's a phrase, something like that. Yeah. And I feel like that happens to more people than they'd like to admit. That 100% happened to me. I was like, I don't need all this help. I think I need all this help, but I'm still working a lot. So something's wrong here if I'm still working this much and paying all these people. So simplifying has been like the word for the last 1.5 years for me, which it's finally like gearing back up, and it feels good. Right direction now.
I love it. I saw a post from Ruth Kudsey, who was my first ever one-on-one coach back in 2019, and she's been on the podcast. And she put a post, and she had grown her team to like 26 people and had then gone and got rid of most of them, because it was a really great post. And she was saying that it felt exhausting energetically to her, just managing all of those people. And so they've just scaled it down. It hasn't actually impacted her bottom line, but
that's amazing.
it was, she said, like, I wasn't enjoying running the business. It was getting away from me. It was big. It felt exhausting. There were too many moving parts. I have definitely done that. I had a situation where I brought on a social media management team, and because it was outside of my VA and the podcast manager, there was so much communication that it just got exhausting. And it's like, you have to think about these things, because it all takes time. Like, if I'm looking at Slack all the time and like connecting these people and sending these bits of information, then is it really saving me time and energy?
100%. I almost thought of it as like a badge of honor. If someone would ask how many team members, like the more, the better. That's how I would literally look at it when I heard someone, 30 team members, you must have a huge business, and it was like this huge thing. And now I look at it, I'm like, you have a lot of overhead. That's like the first thing I think is like, oh, I've been there. I feel for you. And hey, some people run it beautifully and that's what they want. I never wanted that. I just kind of accidentally fell into it. Again, I was modeled and I was just like, all right, I guess this is what you do. You get to a point and you just start investing in these things. And I was like, wait, but it doesn't have to be that way. So it's definitely been a simplification and almost going back to where I started, just with a big brand built so we can get there faster because of all the work we did for many years, but really going back almost to like the basics. I think everyone needs to kind of do that from time to time.
So how many team members do you have right now?
Let's see. Right now I have 1, 2. Sorry, I'm counting on here.
I should know. 30, it's fine.
No. 1, 2, 3. I would say 4, but then I hire some people for project-based things. But like 4 people, or no. Sorry. Oh my gosh, my co-coaches. So 6, if you count my 2 co-coaches that I pay every month. One's my OBM, design team, who again is kind of going to be more project basis. It really depends. Funnels, ads person that might also become project based again, depending on our season. Bookkeeper, and then my 2 co-coaches. So,
and how does that feel like in your body compared to how it felt before?
That's a great question. It feels like a breath of fresh air, to be quite honest. It feels in my body, it's like even my heart, I like just took a deep breath as you said that. Like it just feels, it feels like I'm taking a deep breath. It feels like so much more peaceful and manageable. And these are all people I've been working with for so long. So I also have such deep trust with them. My husband's also coming on to help me with a lot of stuff too. And so that's really fun and scary. And we're navigating all that at the same time. But just because there are so many things that he can learn pretty easily and wants to help, I know that's not going to be everyone's situation. But in the meantime, right now, while he's kind of working on his own stuff, figuring out what he wants to do, he's like, let me help. I want to help build this, together to make it more of ours, so it feels very good. It feels connective. Like it feels like a nice tight unit, like my funnel ad strategist and my OBM, they talk privately all the time. I don't have to be in that conversation. And that's amazing because I'm like, I don't want to deal with the tech stuff. You guys go have fun with that, and it's just like you said, I'm not in it as much in the trenches. But then on the other side, I'm in it more in the ways that matter. Like even my podcast, I decided to do in-house. And it's more so because I felt like I lost touch of it a little bit. And I think that happens when you outsource a lot of stuff is you can feel like, wait, am I even in that anymore? I feel a little bit too removed. And so there were certain things I wanted to be in a little bit more. And that was one of them.
I love your podcast.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
So it's so fun. I definitely feel you in it.
Podcasting is just like, I'm preaching to the choir here as we're on a podcast. It's the best. It's just so fun. I just love it. I could do it all day long. It's great.
Snap. It's like, other than coaching clients, it's my favorite thing I do in my business. Like,
and you can tell with how you show up for your podcast too. It's just like, obviously such a passion.
Yeah. I adore it. And I just can't imagine not having it.
Yeah. Same. I'm like, I would do this if I had no business. I think I'd still do my podcast because it's just like fun. I just truly enjoy it. So I'm so with you on that.
So something else I'd love to touch on before we wrap up is something you said a while ago in content that I know really resonated with a lot of people from the response you got, but has really, really resonated with me too. This idea that if you want to earn a certain amount or grow your business in a certain way, you have to work with a coach that has already done that. So they can therefore teach you how to do it, which I found a really odd thing coming into the online space because I'd already been coaching for a long time. And I had coached people to do things that I had never done. Like I wasn't a mentor, I was a coach. So people had achieved things and I'd supported them in achieving that. And the same now, I have clients that run agencies. I have clients that do VIP days. I have clients that have had 6-figure launches. I haven't had a 6-figure launch. Like that's fine. But I can still coach them because I'm a coach and I can hold space for them. I can pick up on their patterns and I can give them the support they need. But there is this idea in the online space, like you say, like, oh, you want to scale to 6 figures, then you need to hire a coach that scaled to 6 figures. Or, if you want to hit 7 figures, you need to do that. Why do you think that's come about?
It's I love this conversation. And it's a really big testament to like skill versus experience. And I know a lot of people talk about that. Like, do you hire someone who has more experience or skill? I say, try to hire someone who has a little bit of both, at least. But you hit on such a great point. Like if someone can bring something out of you, because like we talked about at the beginning, your clients are the one doing the work. You're not doing the work for them. So if you can bring something out of them that sparks them to go do that work with a different perspective, in a different light, then who cares what you've achieved? And also vice versa. Like, I make it really clear when clients hire me, hey, just because I've achieved certain success does not mean you will, because you have a different life, a different business model, different goals. And when I came into the online space from network marketing, I mean, in itself, it's very much like that. Your coach, I usually, not all the time, but whoever is ahead of you makes more money. And so I was already used to that model, which always was a little wonky. I was like, ooh. And so when I came to the coaching world and that started happening, and I realized, like, what is the difference between this and a pyramid scheme if you're just hiring people who make more money than you so you can make more money and then teach people how to make more money? Like, I'm like, what's the difference? There's no difference, And so I really, in the last few years, when I was choosing my mentors, I kind of flipped that on its head. And I decided I do not care. I'm not even going to ask. I'm not going to look. And I actually hired mentors who don't talk about how much money they make. And specifically two in the last year, and one who I'm still working with on an ongoing basis. It's more of an energy healing, intuitive business kind of coaching that I just really felt called to. But the other one was someone who I specifically hired them because of their corporate background. They had a really different way of looking at things. And I had only hired people who were in the online world since. And I was like, I want to work with someone who's not been in this bubble for that long. I want to get out of the bubble. And that rocked my world in the best way. No clue how much they made. I could infer, I guess, but didn't care. I didn't care because I saw like what they brought to the table, their energy, their attitude. And I was like, that's what I need. I need that like no BS attitude at the time. I need to stop overthinking all these qualities. And I said, I think that's the person. And I did not care how much they made, if they made less than me, if they made more than me. Because like you said, that has no reflection on how much money I'm going to make. And I've had clients this year and last year make more money than me. And they don't care. They don't ask me what my monthly revenue was and go, okay, great, I'm going to keep you. Or no, you're not my coach anymore.
You didn't earn enough. You've got to go.
Right. And it's like this mental thing. And when that was a huge thing I had to deal with when I dropped my income, I was like, okay, you're still a great coach. This is no reflection on your skill set and your experience. And so I think it's so important when you're looking for a coach. Like, I think the accolades and all that they've achieved, that's amazing. And sure, does that mean that they've learned a lot and have great stuff to share? 100%. Like, that's great. But look beyond that. If you are only hiring someone because of that, I don't recommend doing it. I really recommend considering their style, their approach, their skill set. Talk to their clients about the experiences. What was it like in their coaching sphere? Because all that matters so much. I know you've had a lot of people you've worked with who've experienced that because you really help introverts. If someone doesn't understand how introverts work, coach them, it could be crash and burn. Doesn't matter how much money they've made. It's not going to work for them. I've worked with a lot of people who also now coach people with ADHD. And same thing, there's such an underserved part of the market. And I'm like, they need help from someone who gets them, who understands how they operate. So I could go off on a whole tangent on this, but I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's understanding that people have particular skills and talents and their own uniqueness, that if they're able to do that, if I'm able to listen to my client talk for 2 minutes and then say, this is your problem, and they go, thank you, you've just saved me like a week of whatever. Like, it doesn't matter how much I've earned or if I've earned more than them or if we have the same business model. But equally, if I just keep saying, okay, well, do this, because it's what I've done, and they're not getting the results, that's not serving them either.
100. And it's not, like you said, that's not coaching. I mean, I'm sure you've experienced this. I've had clients go off and work with people who made more money than me and come back. I know you've had that happen. Yes. And I'm like, and I'm always taking them with open arms. And I encourage people to go experiment. I'm like, if you're feeling called, go for it. Go work with that person, but question why. Like, what's your reasoning? And to be honest, they thought that there'd be some crazy secret that they'd learn, and they never learn a secret. They never learn a secret.
I looked for the secret for the longest time. I kept jumping around and looked for the secret. And then I was on a wait list to work with Lacey Sites one-on-one for like 7 months. And then I got to work with her, and, she's got this incredible business, and she's got all of these, people with 7-figure businesses. I had clients, they've worked with her forever. So I was like, I'm finally going to get the secret. She was like, no, there isn't a secret. I was like, oh, okay. But I got there in the end because I stopped looking for the secret and just did the work. And then
100%. And I think like we think that there is this secret behind these people who make all this money. And once we work with them or we're in their energy, I hear that a lot, once you're in their energy. And sure, there's something to it, right? If you need someone who's like no BS and that changes it for you, great. Awesome. There's definitely merit to that, but there's no secret. And it does not mean that you're going to have that download. I did do a lot of work with life coaches, and I've been in life coaching programs. And I remember having a session with someone, and it was a life coach in training because I was in training with them and we would practice on each other. And they had a session with me. It changed the game. I went on to have a really good launch, no business coaching, nothing. And they could say that they helped me reach that. And it had nothing to, I have no clue how much they made no money in their business yet. They were in training and life coach training. And they weren't like me who had already built a business and went back to go just to get more coach training. And so I was just like, wow, that is such proof right there, you know? And so I love sharing this. I love this conversation. I think it's so important because again, otherwise, like if we're only hiring people who make a certain amount so we can make a certain amount and then it keeps going down, there is no difference between that and a pyramid scheme. So we just really got to question that. Be like, why am I using this as my only metric to hire someone?
I love it. I got a voice note from a former one-on-one client last week and she's like, oh, I just wanted to check, like, is it okay if I share a win with you? Because I'm, when we're working together, I'm like, share all the wins. Yeah. And she was like, I just thought of you and I wanted to share. And she'd had this win. And it was going back to stuff that we'd laid foundations for like 9 months before when we were working together. And now she was starting to see the ROI on it. And, she'd had that shift in the mindset and she was, just sharing this. And it was so lovely. And that's the other thing. I think people think, oh, something amazing's got to happen while I'm in the 6-month container or the 12-month container. And it's not always the case. Like, hopefully it does, of course. But what you learn or the work that you do or what gets uncovered, it keeps giving over and over. So, that shift has made a difference, say 9 months later, then it's going to keep making a difference for the rest of that person's business. So I think it's important to look at the long-term ROI of what you invest in also.
I love that. That's such a good point. I remember when I had a group program that was 90 days, it's now a year, but when it was 90 days, I would interview people exactly like you said. I would interview them like 3 months after they left the program. So about 6 months, because that I wanted to show that. And some of them even longer, because I wanted to be like, what's happened since 3 months is not a long time. So I can't imagine you've had huge changes, but like, then another 3, then another 3. So I love that. It's so important. Yeah. The work you do now is going to start to come to fruition months later.
We could talk all day, but I know. We could do like a whole podcast series here. But I'm going to wrap up and say thank you for coming and being so transparent and honest and sharing all of your wisdom. It's always a pleasure to chat to you. And do check out Megan's podcast, everyone, because it's great. And she releases twice a week as well, which is brilliant. But before I let you go, obviously, I'm going to ask you for the book that you would recommend for my audience of ambitious introverts who are looking to grow or scale their online business.
Yeah. So one of my favorites that I read twice this year is The Big Leap. Have you read The Big?
Okay, yes, I've read it twice.
Great. Yeah. I read it once and I was like, I need to read that again. And so I read it again and just more downloads. And it really like huge breakthroughs from reading this book. And I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that's why I've been doing this the whole time. And like major things that shifted from this book. The first, I will say, I don't know if you felt this way, give it past the first chapter. The first chapter I felt was a little like old school personal growth. Like I was like, okay, I don't know about this, but my friend said, stick through it. And after that, it really made a difference. So The Big Leap, I really can't recommend enough. I love it.
Perfect. I'm going to pop the link to that in the show notes. I'm going to pop all of your links in the show notes as well, obviously. And I'm just going to say that sometimes reading a book again in a different headspace or a different time of life or business, I've done that. I've read something, I've been like, oh yeah, that's really great. And then I've picked it up again 2 or 3 years later and gone, whoa, okay, now this is life changing.
Yeah. You're like, oh my gosh, I'm doing that with The Obstacle is the Way.
Oh, great book. Yeah. I read that years ago. Yeah.
Same. I read it years ago and I was like, we've had a lot of obstacles thrown our way this year. I was like, I need this book right now. And man, already I'm like, wow, I can see this really like seemingly crappy thing as the way, like the next way out. So that's a twofer. That's another book I'd recommend.
I was going to say, I'll pop that one in the show notes.
Okay, there you go.
We can have
it. But
two.
Exactly. I read that again. I'm like, okay, new downloads. Cool. So love it.
Perfect. Megan, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate you and your wisdom.
I appreciate you. I'm so excited we got to do this. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Ambitious Introvert podcast with me, Emma-Louise Parks. If you enjoy this show, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review on iTunes. As a thank you, one lucky reviewer each month will win a 60-minute one-on-one coaching session with me, where you'll get the clarity and confidence to attract your ideal clients. And if you know someone who could benefit from listening to the show, then please do share and help me reach as many fellow ambitious introverts as possible.